Enterprise TV, a tradition of truth.
Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Spotlight on Enterprise TV today.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll be talking about the NLC demand.
Well, I think it would be right to contextualize the current demands for minimum wage by saying that even before the present economic meltdown that has given rise to these wild spikes in the cost of the most basic essential commodities, including food, staple food, and so on and so forth. Nigerian minimum wages has been among the very lowest, even by African standards. Wages in Africa varies from between $426 per month, countries like Mauritius, to $174 in countries like Kenya, to 172, 170 in countries like Algeria, and so on and so forth. So it's always been among the lowest. I mean, we're talking of 30,000 naira minimum wage. And even then, a lot of state governments were not paying that 30,000 naira. There are lots of, we know of several state governments that pay as low as 9,000 naira minimum wage, yes. And experts have also opined that it's one of the reasons why you have high level of inefficiencies, low productivity, and corruption. Because when you pay people extremely low wages, they are not motivated to put in their best. And now we have the situation we're having now with the current, with the policy changes announced by the federal government as per the foreign exchange regime, which has led to drastic fall in the value of the national currency, and also the so-called removal of subsidies on fuel, which are all combined to lead to this present spike in prices of virtually everything. Within the context of the working people, food, and the most basics like transport, accommodation, school fees, healthcare, all of these have gone through dramatic spikes and so on. And so you have these current jostling for upward reviews, to at least be able to come at par with the level of inflationary trend. I would say that the disparities might be attributed to the fact that perhaps the trade unions themselves have not sat down to actually agree on a template, for a common demand for a wage review. Usually, trade unions rely on what they call cost of living index. So the last wage review was 2019. So what you do is you index 2019 as the base year, and then you look at how prices of essentials have changed from that base, and on the basis of that, demand for wage. So if, for instance, price of gari was 10 naira per mudu in 2019, and is now 1,000 naira, that's tenfold increase in the price of the most staple commodity in Nigeria. So it will make sense that you also want to demand for a wage review that will reflect that quantum of increase in the price of stable. So that gives you a scientific basis to actually make a rational demand. I'm not sure that is being done, and so we're having these perhaps sporadic demands. But when you even look at what is being demanded, 400 and something.
For the Northwest, 485,000.
Yeah.
While for the Southwest, 794,000.
Yeah. Let's even take the highest,
Yes.
which is 700. And how much does that come to in dollars? Perhaps $500. You know, and like I've said, that only comes to the level of the kind of figure we have in some other African countries as minimum wage.
Yes, but the question is, but the question is, why don't we have a uniform minimum wage?
Well, I don't have exact figures of disparities across geopolitical zones in the country, but I think it's common knowledge that generally food is cheaper. After all, most of the food we eat in the southern parts of the country comes from the northern parts. So it's a well-known fact that food is relatively cheaper in the northern parts. So that's one variable that might account for such disparity. You also want to look at the fact that the ability to pay. Because it's not only about what you want, it's also about the capacity to pay on the part of the employer, and which is not only the government, but also the private sector. So you want to look at a situation where perhaps the northern states make less amount of money from the federation accounts. I mean, that's common knowledge, and also a very low presence of industries. So that will, you know, obviously explain why cost of living might be higher in the south, where you have to pay more for food, you have to pay more for accommodation, you have to pay more for transport. I mean, these are obvious realities than you have to pay in the north. And that's the part of the argument of some of the northern governors, that they cannot afford to pay uniform minimum wage with what their colleagues are paying in the south. Because one, they don't earn as much, and also perhaps the needs, I mean, the costs for some of these essentials are actually much lower in the north. These have been some of the historical arguments. But then there has also been the argument by labor that what we call minimum is just a template. It doesn't mean that's what you have to pay. So if the minimum is 30,000 naira, for instance, like it has been since 2019, it doesn't mean that then you must pay 30,000. I mean, nothing stops a state like Lagos, for obvious reasons. The industrial presence, the physical robustness of the Lagos economy, to pay, say, 60,000. If Sokoto is paying 30,000, nothing stops Lagos from paying 60,000, even as it were, you know, because minimum is saying this is the least that is required for a human being to survive in 30 days. So the logic is not that you now insist that you must be tied to that list, you know. It's just saying that no matter how bad, you should be able to pay this. But it is expected that relatively better off states in fiscal terms, Lagos, Akwa Ibom, Delta, and so on and so forth, should be able to pay much more than the minimum. So, so the philosophy of minimum wage is not to have uniform wages across the country. is to set a minimum baseline for wages. So we expect that the poorest states will pay that minimum, and the better off states will pay much more better.
Let's look at the issue of the NLC and the TUC, because it's very important as we take a jibe at the minimum wage.
Well, it's unfortunate that the two main labor centers in the country are not finding a common ground to set a common template for the minimum wage negotiation. We expect that the two of them will meet. Usually, historically, they will set up, a committee will be set up, drawn from stakeholders from both sides, private sector, public sector on both sides, to sit down and draw a common baseline of demands to say, okay, this is what we all agree should be the minimum wage. And that should now set a basis for negotiation, not only with government as an employer, but also with even the private sector. Unfortunately, we're having the discordant notes, which is not very palatable. We will expect that the two centers will sit down together and harmonize, their demands for minimum wage. I must say that I have no mandate to speak for any of the two. I don't. I represent an organization in the informal sector, and of course the dynamics of what people earn in the informal sector is radically different from what it is in the more formal setting, where both NSC and TUC operate. But we will expect that both labor centers will sit down to actually work out a common basis of negotiating a new minimum wage, especially at this time.
All right, so let's take a look at the crux of the matter here, and this centers around His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his governance style. What's on the street have said that every other thing in this administration has increased. The minimum wage is still where it is.
Well, I'm not a presidential spokesperson. I'm not in a position to speak for the president. But I agree with you that we will have expected that, like he himself promised, while he was announcing the removal of petroleum subsidy and the harmonization of parallel market exchange rate with official blah 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 and all of that, and the consequential spiral effect of those twin policies. I remember I did promise that there will be palliatives, there will be wage reviews, and so on and so forth, for working people to be able to cope with those policy changes. So I will be at a loss as a Nigerian myself why this has not been effected. One will have expected that with little or no prompting, that the federal government will have actually undertaken a very serious review of what people earn in this country, given the devastating effect of those twin policies that that have been implemented for the past few months now, and we have all seen the serious impact it has had on the macroeconomy, on socio-economic life, and economic activities, as well as standard of living of most Nigerians. But it might also be argued that minimum wages usually is not something that can be decreed by fiat, because it's also not, the federal government is not the only employer of labor. State and local governments are also employers of labor. You also have private sector, which actually employ more than the public sector. So usually the minimum wages are negotiated has to be negotiated among all these players. Uh, um, but even then, it's worrisome that that process has not uh, been, what will I say, that process will have been underway, by now. This is March, the third month of the new year. We were expected that, okay, maybe the government took the whole of between July 29, when these policies were announced, to December, to actually also review what's happening, the effect and all of that. We expect that in the new year, there will be very vigorous attempt and efforts by all concerned. And in fairness to organized labor, even before the last protest, which they declared, I think February 27th, there had been threats of, we were going on strike, we were going on protest, to actually pressure government to review wages and also implement other palliative measures. Because for us in the informal sector, for instance, the challenge is not even about wages. The challenge is about putting social safety nets in place. That will also offer some cushion, that will also offer some respite for self-employed people who perhaps have even been much more badly affected. We've had situations where a lot of micro and small businesses have had to close down because of the escalating cost of inputs. People simply cannot cope to stock their business. You can't buy new stocks because the prices are going up every day, and your customers' capacity to buy is severely limited. So a lot of small businesses are folded up. The other time, the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, MAN, came up with the information that close to 1,000 businesses in the industries have closed down. A lot of them multinational companies. Here we are talking about attracting foreign direct investment, and we actually have a massive deindustrialization and close down of existing industries, which actually means there's more pressure on the informal sector, because these millions of people being laid off from these thousands of companies that are closing down are going to end up in the informal sector to see how they survive. It means where you used to have 3 Okada riders, there will be maybe 10 now, because people have to survive. So which means the competition will also be stiffer, even in the informal sector. So the capacity for players in the informal sector to also adjust, it becomes much more limited in face of competition, and even in the capacity of the consumer, the customer, to buy.
The president in telling the NLC that they aren't the only voice in Nigeria.
Well, I think the president's statement was rather unfortunate. If you ask me, it smacks of official arrogance. As it were, Nigerian working people were disappointed that it has taken the NSC so long to start with to even take the kind of action they announced the other time, that they were going on protest for 2 days. And then at the end of the day, they managed to do only a day, and then they called the protest off to pay way for negotiation and all of that. And yet the president is going out to say that the NSC is not the only player, blah, blah, blah. When people actually feel that the NSC is not doing enough to mount pressure on the government to do the needful, it sounds insensitive. It doesn't demonstrate an awareness, the slightest awareness of the kind of pains working people are going through in the country. It also doesn't show that the president actually is serious about addressing the fallout of those very volcanic policies that he decided to implement. So in my opinion, I think I would say this statement was even unwarranted. I think at this point, what we need is not some triumphant, we have won it kind of boastful statement from the president, who has expected some level of more sobering, posture from the president. We expect him to reach out actually, not only to organize labor, but to even people like us in the informal economy, to say that yes, we are aware of the pains, we're doing something about it, we are serious about doing something about it, and so we are putting structure and frameworks to actually address these issues. Those are the kind of statement we expect, not to say you are not the only people in the country, blah, 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 and so on and so forth.
All right, so finally, I would love to ask you, if you look into your crystal ball, where do you think that leaves Nigerians with respect to the lack of empathy shown by the president and his government not willing to do anything about this? If this continues in the next 2-3 years, where do you see Nigeria?
Well, if this trend continues, we surely headed for really very dire straits. We don't need to be prophets or to even gaze on any ball to understand that when so many people are pushed into desperation, you have serious social backlashes. Already Nigerians have endured a lot. I would take 2020 COVID-19 as a baseline. We saw how that was extremely mismanaged. We saw how businesses folded up, people literally starved to death. You had the lockdowns without adequate provision for basic minimal survival, especially for people in the informal economy. People somehow we managed to survive that. Then, just as we were trying to, get over all of that, then you have so-called currency redesign or currency colorization. You want to digitalize exchange. You don't want people to cashless. You want to go cashless overnight and all of that. That was crippling. In an economy that is, at least by official figures, 92% informal. That was crippling. That imposed undue suffering that cannot be quantified on working people across board. And thank God we got over that. And now we have this, the so-called subsidy removal. Like some of my friends who argue, it was just fuel price increase in a very exponential manner. And then the new currency policy that has also seen the Naira sliding down by close to 150 to 200% in such a very little space of time. So this relentless assault on working people and has had extreme effects. And already we are seeing the spiking crime rates, kidnappings, armed robberies, and general insecurity, widespread banditry. When we talk of banditry before, your mind will go immediately to the northeast, but now it's all over the north. and the middle, everywhere, the east, everywhere. No part of the country is exempted anymore. We have generalized state of insecurity. If we don't have ameliorative measures in place and things don't change in very fundamental sense, of course, we're going to have a deterioration of the situation. And of course, for young people, it means more and more of them will want to just bail out of the country to find greener pastures elsewhere. People don't know the impact when the only aspiration of your young people is just to get out. You know, because your youth actually is your strength. It should be the basis of your economic aspiration, planning, and everything. You should project on the basis of your young people. You know, the number of young people you are, how you want to put them to work, how you want to, on the basis of what they have to offer, project development. And when you now have a situation where the only aspiration of young people is just to get out of the country, irrespective of their level of education, their level of skill attainment, and so on and so forth, then it's extremely very tragic situation. So we will only hope that the government should not take the weakness of the NSC, maybe to go on strike, to go on the kind of protests we used to have in the Obasanjo days, when Oshiomhole would declare 9 days strike, you know, and so on and so forth. Maybe if they can't do that now, it shouldn't be taken as an opportunity for total impunity. Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Bimba, for being part of our program today.
Right,
It was indeed a very insightful discussion. Thank you so very much, sir.
the pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Enterprise TV, a tradition of truth.